This is Cost and Management Accounting, an introductory lesson series. My name is Huijun Chen. I'm from the Department of Accounting and Information Systems, College of Management at Asia University. Lesson 5, Cost Volume Profit Relationships, or CVP relationships. Before we start cost volume profit analysis, a few key assumptions should be mentioned. To simplify CVP calculations, managers typically adopt the following assumptions with respect to these factors. The first one is selling price is constant. The price of a product or service will not change as volume changes. The second assumption is that costs are linear and can be accurately divided into variable and fixed components. The variable costs are constant per unit, and the fixed costs are constant in total over the entire relevant range. The last one is in multi-product companies, the mix of products sold remains constant. Without these CVP assumptions, it's hard to do the CVP calculations. For this lesson, our learning objective number 1 is to explain how changes in sales volume affect contribution margin and net operating income. Contribution margin is the amount remaining from sales revenue after variable expenses have been deducted. As you can see from this contribution income statement, sales less variable expenses will be equal to contribution margin, which is different from the traditional income statement for external reporting purpose. In a traditional income statement, you will get profit margin rather than contribution margin. The contribution income statement is helpful to managers in judging the impact on profits of changes in selling price, cost, or volume. The emphasis is on cost driver. A cost driver is a factor that influences or causes a change in the total cost of an activity or process. Let's see the contribution approach to get you familiar with the contribution format income statement. Sales, variable expenses, and contribution margin can also be expressed on a per unit basis. Let's take a look at the contribution income statement for Racing Bicycle Company for the month of June. In June, the company sold 500 bicycles at 500 per unit. So the variable expenses per unit is $300. 500 minus 300, you will get 200 contribution margin. That means if Racing sells an additional bicycle, 200 additional contribution margin will be generated to cover fixed expenses and profit, as you can see from here. As Racing Bicycle Company's fixed expenses is $80,000 for the month of June, which means that Racing Bicycle Company must generate at least $80,000 in total contribution margin to break even. Break even is the level of sales at which profit is zero. In this case, how many units or how many bicycles should a Racing Bicycle Company sell to get break even? The answer is 400 bicycles. If Racing Bicycle Company sells 400 bicycles in a month, it will be operating at the break-even point. A break-even point is where net operating income equals zero. So you have to take these 80,000 fixed expenses divided by this 200 contribution margin, then you can get the 400 bicycles, which is the break-even point for the company. As you know how to get break-even unit, you will be understanding if the racing bicycle company sells one more bike, which is 401 bikes, net operating income will increase by $200 because the company's contribution margin is $200. So one more unit or one more bicycle was sold, then 200 contribution margin will be generated. With the help of contribution margin, we do not need to prepare an income statement to estimate the profits at a particular sales volume. You simply multiply the number of units sold above break-even by the contribution margin per unit. So, if RBC sells 430 bicycles, its net operating income will be $6,000. You can take 30 units times 200 contribution margin per unit. You will get the answer. The contribution format income statement can be expressed in the following equation. Profit or net operating income is equal to sales minus variable expenses minus fixed expenses. Or you can take a look at this contribution income statement. Starting from sales dash variable expenses will get you contribution margin. Then you dash fixed expenses, then you will get net operating income. Concept check number 1. Which of the following statements is a common assumption underlying cost of volume profit analysis? You may select more than one answer. A. The variable cost per unit remains constant. B. The selling price per unit remains constant. C. Total fixed costs are constant within the relevant range. D. The total variable costs remain constant as the level of sales fluctuates. What is your answer? A, B, and C are all common assumptions underlying cost of volume profit analysis. Concept check number 2. Once a company hits its break-even point, net operating income will A. Increase by an amount equal to the selling price per unit multiplied by the number of units sold above the break-even point. B. Increase by an amount equal to the contribution margin ratio multiplied by the number of units sold above the break-even point. C. Increase by an amount equal to the contribution margin per unit multiplied by the number of units sold above the break-even point. D. Increase by an amount equal to the variable cost per unit multiplied by the number of units sold above the break-even point. What is your answer? The correct answer is C. Once a company hits its break-even point, net operating income will increase by an amount equal to the contribution margin per unit multiplied by the number of units sold above the break-even point. Learning objective number 2 is to prepare and interpret a cost of volume profit graph and a profit graph. The relationships among revenue, cost, profit, and volume can be expressed graphically by preparing a CVP graph. Racing bicycle develop contribution margin income statements at 0, 200, 400, and 600 units sold. We will use this information to prepare the CVP graph. This is the contribution format income statement at different units sold for this company. This is step 1 for preparing the CVP graph. In a CVP graph, unit volume, is usually represented on the horizontal x-axis here, and the other on the vertical or y-axis here. The second step is to draw a line parallel to the volume axis to represent total fixed expenses. So the total fixed expenses line is here, and that is $80,000, no matter how many units were sold. Step 3 is to choose some sales volume, say 400 units, here 400 units, and plot the point representing total expenses, both fixed and variables. Here, this is fixed and this is total expenses. Draw a line through the data point back to where the fixed expenses line intersects the dollar axis, here. So the red line represents fixed expenses. The blue line represents the total expenses. Step 4 is to choose some sales volume, again say 400 units here, and plot the point representing total sales. That's here, okay, the blue line. Draw a line through the data point back to the point of origin here. From the CVP graph we just finished, you can see the break-even point is here. That is equal to the 400 units were sold, over 200,000 in sales. And this area will be the loss area if you sell less than 400 units. If you sell more than 400 units, you will have profit. So this is the profit area. So again, the red line is the fixed expenses. The blue line is the total expenses, and the green line is the total sales. There is an even simpler form of the CVP graph, which is called the profit graph. We have to use this equation to finish the graph. That is, profit is equal to unit contribution margin times quantity sold minus fixed costs. You will get this line, so this one is easier. From this profit graph, you can see the break-even point is here. When you sell 400 units, or the profit is 0. Okay, time for a concept check. The contribution margin ratio always increases when A. Sales increase, B. Fixed cost decrease, C. Total variable cost decrease, D. Variable cost as a percent of sales decrease. What do you think? The answer is D. Variable cost as a percent of sales decrease, because contribution margin ratio is equal to contribution margin divided by total sales, and total sales minus variable cost is equal to contribution margin. So variable cost as a percent of sales decrease, then the contribution margin ratio will increase. Learning objective number 3 is to use contribution margin ratio to compute changes in contribution margin and net operating income resulting from changes in sales volume. This is the contribution format income statement for a racing bicycle company for the month of June. In June, 500 bicycles were sold at $500 each, so the total sales is $250,000. That's variable expenses, $150,000. You will get contribution margin, which is $100,000. That's fixed expenses, $80,000. Then you will get net operating income, which is $20,000. Please be noted that the emphasis of contribution income statement is the cost driver, which is the direct cause of a cost and its effect on the total cost incurred. The contribution margin as a percentage of sales is referred to as the contribution margin ratio or CM ratio. This ratio is computed as follows. You take contribution margin divided by sales. You will get the contribution margin ratio. For Racing Bicycle Company, the contribution margin ratio is 40%. You will get this number by taking $100,000. That is the contribution for this company divided by $250,000. That is the total sales. So 40% is the contribution margin ratio, which means each $1 increase in sales results in a total contribution margin increase of 40 cents. The contribution margin ratio can also be calculated by dividing the contribution margin per unit by the selling price per unit. This is the formula. So for Racing Bicycle Company, you can take 200 contribution margin per unit divided by 500 selling price per unit. You will get the same contribution margin ratio, which is 40%. The variable expenses as a percentage of sales is referred to as the variable expense ratio. This ratio is computed as follows. You take variable expenses divided by sales, then you will get variable expense ratio. For Racing Bicycle Company, the variable expense ratio is calculated as follows. You take $150,000, which is the variable expenses for this company, divided by $250,000, that is the total sales. You will get 60%, that is the variable expense ratio. Having defined the two terms, you must notice that the contribution margin ratio and the variable expense ratio can be mathematically related to each other. Here is the demonstration. Contribution margin ratio is equal to contribution margin divided by sales, and contribution margin is equal to sales minus variable expenses. So the contribution margin ratio can also be shown as sales minus variable expenses divided by sales. So the contribution margin ratio is equal to 1 minus variable expense ratio. So in our case, our contribution margin ratio is 40% and our variable expenses ratio is 60%. So together they will be equal to 1. We can do the applications of a contribution margin ratio. If Racing Bicycle Company increases sales from 400 to 500 bikes or 50,000, what will be the increase in contribution margin? Okay, the basic information for this company is their variable cost is 300 per bike and the fixed cost is 80,000. Selling price is 500 per bike. You can see from the contribution income statement, sales increased from $200,000 to $250,000, which is $50,000 increase. $50,000 increase in sales revenue resulted in a $20,000 increase in contribution margin. You can simply by taking $50,000 increase in sales times 40% contribution margin ratio, you will get $20,000 for the increase in net operating income. The relationship between profit and the contribution margin ratio can be expressed using the following equation. Profit or net operating income is equal to contribution margin ratio times sales, which is equal to contribution margin minus fixed expenses. So if Racing Bicycle Company increased its sales volume to 500 bikes. What would management expect profit or net operating income to be? So you can take a 40% contribution margin ratio times $250,000, that is the total sales, minus fixed expenses, which is $80,000. You will get the answer, which is $20,000. Now it's time for our concept check number 1. Coffee King is an espresso stand in a downtown office building. The average selling price of a cup of coffee is $1.49, and the average variable expense per cup is $0.36. The average fixed expenses per month is $1,300 per month. An average of 2,100 cups are sold each month. What is the contribution margin ratio for Coffee King? Please think about it. The answer is B. You have to calculate the contribution margin ratio first. Our unit contribution margin will be equal to 1.49 minus 0.36 divided by the unit selling price, which is 1.49. Then you will get the answer. Let's move to learning objective number 4 to determine the break-even point. The break-even point is where the unit sales and dollar sales needed to achieve a target profit of 0. Let's use the Racing Bicycle Company information to complete the break-even analysis. Here is the contribution format income statement for Racing Bicycle Company. Sales start here. Okay, 500 bicycles were sold in the month of June at 500 per unit. The variable expenses is 300 per unit, so the contribution margin per unit is $200. Our total fixed expenses is $80,000. Okay, at this amount, our net operating income is $20,000. Here is the information for contribution margin ratio and variable expenses ratio. This is the equation methods for a break-even analysis. The equation method relies on the basic profit equation introduced earlier in the lesson. Because Racing Bicycle has only one product, we use the contribution margin form of this equation to perform the break-even calculations. We calculate the break-even by solving the equation below. You take net operating income, which is the profit, equal to a unit contribution margin times break-even quantity minus fixed expenses. In our case, you have to set the profit equal to 0. So 0 is equal to 200. That is our unit contribution margin times break-even quantity minus fixed expenses, which is $80,000. By solving this equation, you can get the break-even point. We can also do formula method for the break-even analysis. The formula method is a shortcut version of the equation method. It centers on the idea discussed earlier in the lesson that each unit sold provides a certain amount of contribution margin that goes toward covering the fixed expenses. So the formula is like this. Unit sales to break even is equal to fixed expenses divided by unit contribution. Our fixed expenses is $80,000 per month. Our unit contribution margin is 200, so 400 units would be our break-even point. Let's do concept check number 2. Again, the same example from Coffee King. Their average selling price is $1.49 and variable expenses is $0.36. The average fixed expenses per month is $1,300 an average of 2,100 cups are sold each month. So what is the break-even sales dollars? The answer is B. You take the $1,300,000 fixed expenses divided by contribution margin ratio, which is 0.758. You will get the answer. Concept check number 3 is the same example from Coffee King. At this point, what is the break-even sales in units? Same information from previous slide. The answer is D. Okay, so break-even is equal to fixed expenses divided by contribution margin per unit. So fixed expenses is $1,300 and contribution per unit, you take 149 minus 0.36, then you will get 150 cups, which is the answer. Learning objective number 5 is to determine the level of sales needed to achieve a desired target profit. In target profit analysis, we estimate what sales volume is needed to achieve a specific target profit. We can compute the number of units that must be sold to attain a target profit using either equation method or formula method. Here is the equation method. You set target profit equal to unit contribution margin times must be sold quantity minus fixed expenses. Our goal is to solve out for the unknown Q, which represents the quantity of units that must be sold to attain the target profit. Here is the formula method. The formula method uses the following equation. You set unit sales to attain the target profit equal to target profit plus fixed expenses divided by contribution margin per unit. We can also compute the target profit in terms of sales dollars using either the equation method or the formula method. Here is the target profit analysis by using the equation method. Suppose a racing bicycle company management wants to know the sales volume that must be generated to earn a target profit of $100,000. Here is the equation. You set profit equal to $100,000 and then make that equal to contribution margin ratio, which is 40% times sales minus the $80,000 fixed expenses. You will get the sales equal to $450,000. We can also use the formula method. You set dollar sales to attain the target profit equal to target profit plus fixed expenses divided by contribution margin ratio. In our case, our target profit is $100,000. Our fixed expenses is $80,000. Added these two numbers together, divided by the 40% contribution margin ratio, you will get the dollar sales for $50,000. Let's do the concept check number 4. Again, the same example from Coffee King. This company's the average selling price of a cup of coffee is 1.49. The average variable expenses per cup is 0.36. The average fixed expenses per month is $1,300. Please use the formula methods to determine how many cups of coffee would have to be sold to attain target profits of $2,500 per month. The answer is A. Okay, the formula is here. You take a target profit plus fixed expenses divided by unit contribution margin. So you will get 3363 cups. Now let's do concept check number 5. At this time, we also use the formula method, but we have to determine the sales starters that must be generated to attain target profit of $2,500 per month. The answer is B. At this time, the formula would be like this. You take a target profit, which is $2,500 plus fixed expenses, which is $1,300, divided by contribution margin ratio, okay, which is 0.758. You will get the answer $5,013. Learning objective number 6. Compute the margin of safety and explain its significance. The margin of safety is the excess of budgeted or actual sales dollars over the break-even volume of sales dollars. It is the amount by which sales can drop before losses are incurred. The equation for margin of safety in dollars is equal to total sales minus break-even sales. Let's take a look at Racing Bicycle Company and determine the margin of safety. If we assume that Racing Bicycle Company has actual sales of $250,000, given that we have already determined the break-even sales to be $200,000. So the margin of safety is $50,000 as shown. See, the break-even sales, that is 400 units sold. The total sales is $200,000. The actual sales for 500 units is $250,000. So the margin of safety is equal to $250,000 minus $200,000, which you will get $50,000. Racing Bicycle Company's margin of safety can be expressed as 20% of total sales. The formula is here. You take $50,000 divided by $250,000. That is called the margin of safety percentage. The margin of safety can also be expressed in units. For example, the margin of safety at Racing Bicycle Company is $50,000, and each bike sells for $500. Therefore, Racing Bicycle Company's margin of safety is 100 bikes. You can calculate as follows. You take $50,000 divided by the 500, you will get 100 bikes. That is our margin of safety in units. Let's do the concept check number 6, also from Coffee King. Coffee King is an espresso stand in a downtown office building. The average selling price of a cup of coffee is $1.49, and the average variable expense per cup is 0.36. The average fixed expense per month is $1,300. An average of 2,100 cups are sold each month. What is the margin of safety expressed in cups? The answer is B. Margin of safety is equal to total sales minus break-even sales. So you take 2,100 cups minus 1,150 cups, you will get 950 cups. That is the answer for this concept check. Concept check number 7. Which of the following statement is false with respect to the margin of safety? A. The total budgeted or actual sales minus sales at the break-even point equals the margin of safety in dollars. B. The margin of safety in dollars divided by the total budgeted or actual sales in dollars equals the margin of safety percentage. In C, in a single product company, the margin of safety in dollars divided by the variable cost per unit equals the margin of safety in units. D, the margin of safety in dollars can be a negative number. So what do you think? The answer is C. C is not correct. In a single product company, the margin of safety in dollars divided by sales price per unit equals the margin of safety in units. Based upon the previous discussions, An important issue regarding to cost structure and profit stability arises. Cost structure refers to the relative proportion of fixed and variable costs in an organization. Managers often have some latitude in determining their organization's cost structure. For example, an investment in an automated equipment or system can reduce variable labor costs, but it will incur other fixed costs, so the cost structure will be changed, and that will influence the profit stability. You might ask which cost structure is better. There are advantages and disadvantages to high fixed costs or low variable costs and low fixed costs over high variable cost structures. And the answer to which structure is better depends on various factors, including the long-term trend in sales, year-to-year fluctuations in the level of sales, and the attitude of the owners towards risk. Without knowing the future, it's not obvious which cost structure is better. Learning objective number 7 is to compute the degree of operating leverage at a particular level of sales and explain how it can be used to predict changes in net operating income. Operating leverage is a measure of how sensitive net operating income is to percentage changes in sales. It is a measure at any given level of sales of how a percentage change in sales volume will affect profits. Its formula is equal to contribution margin divided by net operating income. Operating leverage tells you how much of a company's expenses are fixed versus variable. Higher operating leverage means that as sales grow, more of these sales trickle down into a company's operating income. To illustrate operating leverage, let's revisit the contribution income statement for Racing Bicycle Company. The company's contribution margin is $100,000. Its net income is $20,000. So the degree of operating leverage will be equal to $100,000 divided by $20,000, which is 5. That means net operating income grows 5 times as fast as Racing Bicycle Company's sales. With an operating leverage of 5, if Racing Bicycle Company increases its sales by 10%, net operating income would increase by 50%. Here is the demonstration. Percentage change in sales is 10%, then our degree of operating leverage is 5. So you take 10% times 5, you will get the 50% increase in profits. Let's see the verification. If Racing Bicycle Company's sales increase from $250,000 to $275,000, that means there is a 10% increase in sales. We can take a look at the net operating income will be increased from $20,000 to $30,000. That is a 50% increase. Please remember that operating leverage is not a constant. Here are 2 notes to operating leverage. The first one is that if 2 companies have the same total revenue and expense, but different cost structure, the company with the higher proportion of fixed costs in its cost structure will have higher operating leverage. The second one is that the degree of operating leverage is not a constant. It's greatest at sales levels near the break-even point and decreases as sales and profit rise. Concept check number 8. What is the operating leverage for Coffee King? What do you think? The answer is A. You take the contribution margin, which is 2373, divided by net operating income, which is 1073, you will get 2.21. That is your operating leverage. Concept check number 9. What if sales increase by 20%? By how much should net operating income increase for Coffee King? What is your answer? The answer is D. You simply take 20% times 2.21, which is our degree of operating leverage. You will get the percent increase in profit, which is 44.2%. Companies generally compensate salespeople by paying them either a commission based on sales or a salary plus a sales commission. Commissions based on sales dollars can lead to lower profits in a company. Do you believe that? Let's take a look at an example. Pipeline Unlimited produces two types of surfboards, the RX-7 and the Turbo. The RX-7 sells for $100 and generates a contribution margin per unit of 25. The Turbo sells for $150 and earns a contribution margin per unit of $18. The sales force at Pipeline Unlimited is compensated based on sales commissions. Which product do you think the sales force will try their best to sell? If you were on the sales force at Pipeline, you will push hard to sell the Turbo even though the RX-7 earns a higher contribution margin per unit. So, to eliminate this type of conflict, commissions can be based on contribution margin rather than on selling price alone. This is the end of Lesson 5. My name is Huijin Chen, and I'm from the Department of Accounting and Information Systems, College of Management at Asia University.